You're not going to want to miss this AVARigs because this Hyte hype is hot. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us this week. I'm Joseph Mundy with AVA Direct Custom Computers, the system integrator with the mostest. Mostest component offerings, mostest configurators, everything at just the click of a button, and you have yourself a custom-built PC. If you don't believe me, you can check out our website and you can do it for yourself. avadirect.com. Now, this PC, based on a Hyte case, is built in our H670 PC configurator. It is the H670 desktop as named on our website. The biggest difference between the H670 and the Z790 is as implied. It offers different boards based on classification of user. The H series is typically for your home desktop user, while the Z is for your elitist. Enough about motherboard classifications, let's just talk about what's in the PC, shall we? The PC case used in this build is the Hyte Y60. It's got tempered glass on it, obviously, and I like the look of it considering the fact that it's not your traditional like right angle tempered glass meets the tip of the other right angle tempered glass. The downside to that, though, is we'll talk about that a little bit later. It's got an ASUS Tough Gaming H670 Pro Wi-Fi board D4, which is classification for a next-gen motherboard that uses DDR4. Speaking of DDR4, it has 32 gigabytes of vintage RGB, as you can see. It's got an Intel i7-12700KF, KF meaning doesn't have integrated graphics, which if you have a dedicated graphics card, there's really no need. Or a motherboard with outboard ports. But this motherboard does have video output. That just means they're not usable. You know, who cares when you have a dedicated graphics card, I suppose. Graphics card is an RTX 3060 Ventus by MSI. The Ventus series cards you see more predominantly through system integrators because that is MSI's system integrator specific SKU for graphics cards. Retail, you usually see like their X Trio or like their liquid-cooled Supreme X versions, right? It's got an EVGA 850 watt B5 bronze power supply. Plenty enough for an i7 processor and an RTX 3060. It's cooled by an NZXT Kraken Z63 liquid cooler. Doesn't have a whole lot of RGB elements to it, but we added RGB elements to it with fans. Those fans are the CORSAIR iCUE QL120 RGB white colored quiet levitation fans. Because there's LL fans, which don't stand for quiet levitation, and there's QL fans that do stand for quiet levitation. It's quiet. It's got two Samsung SSDs, a 1 terabyte 980, which is an M.2 based SSD, and it's got a 1 terabyte 870 EVO, which is a SATA based SSD. My guess is the 1 terabyte is for games and applications, and the 1 terabyte SATA SSD could also technically be used for games without detriment in storage. And then it's got a big Western Digital 1 terabyte black. And by big, I mean form factor, not capacity, obviously. 3.5-inch drives are on their way out, but still, some people like to buy them because they're good value. I bet they probably paid close to $65 to $70 for a 1 terabyte black hard drive, and that's not bad. Now, you can't see it by looking in the system, but it has a capture card along with it. It's an external dedicated capture card by EVGA. It's the XR1 Pro. It's got a 4K pass-through, which is nice to have. Granted, I don't anticipate the end user using this PC for much 4K gaming unless it's like Fortnite or Minecraft, you know, something that you can output 4K and it's going to be able to handle it with a 3060 no problem. But still, you've got that capability, which just goes to show you that the PCs we build are expandable and upgradable to really no limit other than the way it's specified. So with an 850 watt, I'd say a 4080, maybe a 4090 might be pushing it a little bit, but you get away with it. It'd post, it'd run. Whether it would catch fire, I don't know. On the topic of the black and white contrast, it's also really nice to have RGB fans in a build when there's kind of white accents to it because it helps disperse a lot of the light. So in a dark setting with, you know, unicorn colors flying about inside the case, the white's gonna kind of help contrast that all over the place, which is nice. And then of course, for a budget build, this is done very well. It's got 32 gigs of memory, an i7 processor, and an RTX 3060. It's a really good recipe for a decent budget build without breaking the bank, and also you're going to be able to game on a fair amount of things up to 1440p, I would say, is going to be the best experience. 4K, you might be pushing a little bit, as I said, but still, depending on the size of your display, the differences between 1440p and 4K are still minimal. When you tend to go above, let's say, 32 inches, you really can't tell the difference beyond that. So I game on an LG 48-inch display, and I still can't see the difference between 1440p and 4K sometimes, unless the game is textured with 4K textures. Then you might be able to to see a bit more clarity and stuff. But other than that, it's a solid build to be able to game on 1440p. Now let's talk about the cons. So while I do love the shape of the case, because of the way that it's just a solid tempered glass side panel, there are some concerns with fragility. If you're moving around a whole lot with your system, which I would hope you're not, because this thing is a chunk, then you have to be really careful about transporting it. Save the box, if anything, to make sure that the tempered glass isn't going to get overly scratched up or potentially break even, depending on how it's transported. The power supply is a con for me. It's bronze. Gold is typically kind of the standard now, and the price differences between gold and bronze power supplies, it's minimal. So you could have had a bit more efficiency in your system if you had opted for gold. Although I did once hear from an electrical engineer that based on the way that power supplies are manufactured and how the electronic components work to introduce that kind of power savings, that technically speaking, platinum and titanium and gold power supplies have a higher mean time between failure because they're under much more duress to be able to provide the kind of performance needed to introduce those power savings. And so by technicality on paper, bronze power supplies are just inherently more reliable based on how they're designed. And the last con I would say is DDR4. With the emergence of DDR5 now, you would hope to see more systems with DDR5, especially in a 12th gen system. But that was right around the time when DDR5 was first introduced, but DDR4 was still prominent. So board manufacturers like ASUS were releasing board models that could support both DDR4 and DDR5 separately. This is a budget build, so it makes sense why you'd want to go with DDR4, because introducing DDR5 in a build like this probably would have increased the price by about $300. And for many of us, $300 is a lot of money. And the performance differences and the gains from going to DDR4 to DDR5 are minimal. So save your $300 and do something that makes more sense, right? I'm going to talk about some of the test results because we provided two services to the system, one in which was standard wire management. As you can see, it's beautifully done as always, but we also overclocked the GPU. So the GPU had a 150 megahertz boost to its core clock and a 300 megahertz boost to its memory clock, with an average core temperature of 69 degrees Celsius and a hotspot temperature of 81.2 degrees Celsius, which is pretty awesome because the thermal ceiling for a lot of these RTX GPUs is right around 83 degrees to 86, depending on what it is. So even with that kind of an overclock applied to it, it still didn't reach thermal ceiling. We really don't like to push graphics cards more while they're being cooled on their stock air coolers, though. If it was liquid cooled, we potentially could have pushed it even further, but we always try to err on the side of caution when it comes to making sure that our systems are as stable as possible. Use case scenario is pretty clear. I would assume this is going to be a gaming PC, and with the addition of a capture card, we can also safely assume that they're going to stream on it in some way, shape, or form, and they're set up pretty well for it, I'd say. As I said in previous videos, there's really not huge need to have separate PCs for streaming and gaming anymore. Unless you're doing it professionally, then they'll do that just for, I guess, redundancy's sake. Shout out to the tech that built this system, Alex Kramer. You did a fantastic job, and you embodied what we do here at AVA Direct as far as build quality and professionalism. Yay! SKU of the system, if you were interested in building this system and purchasing it for yourself, is 159-825-83. We'll also have the SKU for the system in the description of the video, as well as a link directly to the configuration that was used to build it as built. And you can feel free to make modifications as you need, because that is literally what we do. Here's an example of a system. Don't like it, then change it. Stop complaining to us. Do whatever you want. That's what we let you do. Your parents can't tell you no. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on this week's AVARigs. Do feel free to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you can get notified of any new videos we post based on systems that we build or reviews that we're doing, or maybe we're going to run promotions. You'll never know. So stay notified and stay tuned. Thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your day.
If you like the PC in this video, be sure to contact our sales team at sales@avadirect.com, or you can head over to our website by clicking on the link in the description below. You can choose from many pre-built options, gaming or workstation based, or use our configurator to build a PC of your dreams. Be sure to click that thumbs up button and subscribe, and don't forget to follow our social media channels at avadirect.com.